All right. Sue me, man. I'm going to talk about Bloodborne for a second. Did you all see the news recently about Bloodborne, man? But it's interesting, dude. More details came out recently about what happened with Bluepoint's closure. These mother flippers actually pitched Bloodborne in 2025 to Sony, and they were going to work on it. But here's what's interesting, right? Sony were fine to work on the game. For a long time, people have villainized Sony over the whole Bloodborne thing. Of like, okay, it's never going to happen because Sony doesn't want it to happen. As it actually turns out, From Software didn't want that remake to happen. Miyazaki didn't want that remake to happen. And that's why Sony didn't greenlight it for Bluepoint. They actually saw the projections and they were like, yeah, this is going to make us a good bit of money. Let's, like, yeah, go ahead and do it. But From Software were like, no, we're not cool with it. Miyazaki was not okay with it. Which is interesting, dude. And I've seen a lot of people melting down over it. Like, Miyazaki, why? You betrayed us. Fuck. And a lot of people going, well, yeah, it makes sense. Bluepoint, huh. It's just like validating people who didn't like the, you know, Demon Souls remake. Well, Demon Souls remake was ass, all right? And Miyazaki didn't want to see, you know, Sony and Bluepoint manhandling Bloodborne with the remake treatment, or should I say demake treatment. Like, no, it's all stupid. Like, Miyazaki's literally been on record saying that he appreciates and respects how they handled the Demon Souls remake. So you're just talking out of your ass. It's not because he didn't like the fact that they quote-unquote butchered the Demon Souls remake. It makes perfect sense to me. It's because you're an artist, you're a magnum opus. I mean, Miyazaki has been on record multiple times saying Bloodborne is the best game he's ever made, right? Hands down. If you're an artist of something you're incredibly proud of, you'd want your imprint on it if anything's to be done with it, right? And it's interesting because the previous Sony boss, before Jim Ryan, right, everyone's favorite Jim Ryan, the previous Sony boss talked about how he speculated, this was a long time ago, by the way, how Miyazaki was not going to want a Bloodborne remake to happen because he'd want to work on it himself at some point. And he was right. This is apparently what happened, according to the insider reports. So it's fascinating, dude. I can't blame Miyazaki. I'm just sad that ultimately it's a nuanced situation, right? The only thing that should be villainized here is the shutting down of Bluepoint, right? And the staff getting laid off and the mismanagement there, right? Incredibly talented people who know how to make great games, right? That being shut down. I see people going, oh, it wasn't actually Sony who were the piece of shit. It was Miyazaki. No, it was like, no, dude, it's not black and white like that. But it is interesting, dude. I just wish that even though Bluepoint couldn't figure out something with Bloodborne, that they were still given the chance, you know, to come up with something. Instead, Sony were like, no, God of War live service. Oh, it's not working. Gonna be a Concord 2. If you can't do nothing, you're shut down. So, yeah, it's been a really interesting week, honestly. And again, I can't blame Miyazaki, dog. You know, I feel really sad that it never happened and we got close, because I love Bloodborne. But you ask me, dog, like, Bloodborne never needed a remake. It does not need a remake. It just needs a 60 FPS patch. That's literally it. Or a PC port. And at this point, whatever, it doesn't matter. Because emulation has gotten so good with Shad PS4 for Bloodborne that that's the future of it. It's going to be like MGS3 or MGS4 for eons. Like, the only way to play is to emulate. But Shad PS4 emulation's gotten good, so. And have a ton of interest in a Bloodborne remake, but it's a bit crushing that the dream of Bloodborne remake is pretty shot right now. Yeah, and I mean, Bloodborne's my second favorite game ever, so I love the game. But even I don't give a fuck about a remake, dude. There was a time I would have, but I've changed a lot in like the last 5 to 6 years with my mentality towards remakes. I used to love the idea of remakes, and I used to love remakes getting announced. Shit could not make me happier. And I still do get excited, right? Like, we saw the God of War remake announcement the other day at the State of Play, and I was really happy. I was really, really happy about that. But the thing is that, like, I don't actively hope for remakes anymore. Like, there was a time when I would have hoped for, you know, like, let's go Final Fantasy IX remake, you know, freaking Final Fantasy Tactics remake. And we did get the remaster, but, and more on that in a second, but now I'm at the point where instead of remakes, the best I could hope for games is for them to be touched up a little bit at most, you know, given decent frame rate, given decent controls, so that, you know, the gameplay translates a little bit better with like modern game design standards and stuff like that. So like a high quality remaster, I like to call these remaster makes, right? I'm cool with that, where it's more about preservation of the original experience, right? It doesn't matter if you're going to use like the same code, if you're going to do stuff from scratch, preserve that original experience. You don't need to radically reconstruct everything from the ground up to like reimagine it. I don't give a fuck about reimaginations anymore. Just give me that same core experience, right? But just like the definitive version of it. And even if we don't get that, that's cool by me, but it will be nice to get it, you know? Because we now have standards in this day and age that we didn't have back then. So if we can bring classics up to speed with those standards, right, which we don't need remakes for, if you ask me, like that's just music to my ears, you know? Like, again, great example. I will forever and always live and die by this example. Crisis Core Reunion. Like, Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, it's a Crisis Core Reunion, is exactly bingo bango bongo, the kind of shit I want to see in the industry when it comes to, like, taking a classic and bringing it up to speed with modern standards, right? Because that game is not a remake, it's not a reimagination, it's a ridiculously high-quality remaster, right? It's like Square Enix themselves call it, quote-unquote, more than a remaster in their marketing for the game, because it's all about the same core shit you played back in 2007. There's literally nothing different about it, except for additions that make the game more enjoyable, and fixes that once again make the game more enjoyable, right? It just feels like you're playing a nice, minty, fresh version of the game. That's all we really need when it comes to this kind of stuff, you know? Like I said, I was really excited too for something being done to Bloodborne someday. You know, the latest hopium we were on was the brand of, oh, nothing is being done for it, nothing's being announced about it because Bluepoint are going to be working on a PS6 launch version of Bloodborne, like they did for Demon's Souls on PS5, right? But now those hopes and dreams have been shattered. But you know what sucks is that I'm not surprised in the slightest that it didn't even get close and that they weren't ultimately even working on it. I'm not surprised that it was talked about, that it was pitched by Bluepoint, but I'm also not surprised that that's, you know, as far as we got and that nothing ever came of it. It is really interesting, though, to me that, yeah, as it turns out, it was Miyazaki all along. And I don't mean that in a bad way, right? He understandably just didn't want his shit to be worked on without him, because Bloodborne's his favorite thing he's made ever. And he's mentioned in the past, and this does not contradict what he said in the past, by the way. I've seen people saying he's contradicting himself. He's not. Because in the past he said that I would love for there to be Bloodborne on PC. And that is wholly different from like what Bluepoint would do, right? Which is like completely remake it, like, and reimagine it. That is very fucking different from just putting it on PC at 60 FPS, my dude. Which, that I don't understand, man. I don't get why Sony, and it has to be a source code thing. There's no other explanation. What I don't understand is why they can't just put it on PC at 60 FPS. That's it, right? We don't need it remade. We don't need any of that. I mean, you put God of War on there. You put Horizon Zero Dawn on there. So, like, why not Bloodborne, right? It's easy cash printing. Like, and that is not something Miyazaki is opposed to. That is not something, you know, he doesn't want done. He just doesn't want the game to be, you know, remade from scratch. The only logical explanation is that they lost the source code when Japan Studio shut down, right? Because that was another studio owned by Sony, and it's a studio that worked on Bloodborne in collaboration with From Software, and they shut down Japan Studio a couple years ago, who, by the way, Japan Studio also made Legend of Dragoon back in 2000. So that was kind of gutting to hear that they're gone for me. It wasn't a big deal to a lot of people, but to me, Japan Studio's closure was almost as big as Bluepoint being shut down. Bloodborne has not been touched in 11 years in any way whatsoever. We're talking about the bare minimum. Okay, the bare minimum is not even a PC port at 60 FPS for Bloodborne. The bare minimum, chat, would actually have been Bloodborne going from PS4 to PS5 with a performance boost. The same way if you play something like Sekiro on a PS5, you're gonna get 60 frames per second, but if you play on a PS4, it's 30. They didn't even do that for Bloodborne. They didn't even unlock the frame rate when playing that PS4 game on a PS5. So they have done nothing for Bloodborne. Nada. Nada. Demon's Souls to Demon's Souls remake. Bloodborne does not need that, my dude. It doesn't. Alright, the art direction, the visual direction, it all holds up extremely well. If you were to change that in any way, and it didn't involve Miyazaki, it would be crappy, man. Like, I'm just gonna keep it real, it would be crappy. Why would you want to change that in any way? Right, just for the sake of remaking something that's gonna dilute the product. If it's just for the sake of remaking it, right? So why would I be excited for that? I'd be excited if we got something new, right? A part of me would be looking forward to it, but I'd be cautiously optimistic because that is not what Bloodborne needs, you know? Remakes, I think the best case scenario with them is that they add in content you always hoped for with the original that wasn't there, and for them to be able to do that effectively, right? We need remakes ultimately that fix issues with the original game. If you want to remaster Bloodborne in 2040, fine. I think it will happen. Oh, fuck. I don't want to say those words. All right, let me rephrase that. One of the worst ways to start a conversation as a Bloodborne fan. I think it will happen. Oh my god. I hope it happens someday. I still do. Even that's like too cooked to just hope at this point. The only sliver of possibility of it happening now is Miyazaki showing interest in it happening. That's it. Otherwise, the future of Bloodborne is emulation. That's gonna. It's the future of Bloodborne is how y'all have been playing MGS4 for like the last gazillion years before they finally announced that Master Collection the other day or the other week. A couple weeks now. Time flies.